Well, Karen Dotrice, it is so lovely to see you again.
Hello, gorgeous people. How are you?
We are fabulous, and you're in your summer home in Maine. And I can only hope you've just come in from picking a whole bunch of wild blueberries.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, hang on. It's a bit blue around here, but yeah, it is delicious. It's what we do here.
Look, you are a bona fide Disney legend. This is a fact. It was back in 2004, as I recall it, that Walt Disney's family bestowed you with that particular honor. I mean, how chuffed were you then and now?
Oh, well, Craig, it was amazing. I mean, it's something you can't even imagine that you're anyway worthy of. It's such a privilege. And Uncle Walt and I were so close that, it was just another thing that felt so close to my heart to have that honor. And I was accepting it on behalf of myself and my brother in the movie Mary Poppins, and the other movie we made together, The No-Mobile. And so I felt very honored that I was picking it up for Jane and Michael Banks.
I mean, you were so loved all over the world for so many Disney movies, three big ones, including Mary Poppins, which is 60 this year, if you can believe it.
I know, because I'm only 48. I don't know how that happened.
It does seem an impossibility, doesn't it? But the world sometimes is full of miraculous things, Karen. But let's do a rewind, because your family is fascinating. Your father, of course, Roy Dotrice, and your mum, Kay Newman, they are considered British showbiz royalty.
Thank you. Yes, very lucky to be born into that crowd. And my two sisters are actresses as well. Well, one is also retired, but my elder sister, Michelle, very much a busy girl. It's unbelievable. She's 10 years older than I, and she never stops. She's unreal. She's always on stage or on film or television, which is great.
And for those thinking, I know that name, Michelle Dotrice, of course, she was Betty opposite the wonderful Michael Crawford in Some Mothers Do Have 'Em.
Yes, it's absolutely true. Yes. Oh, Betty. Yes.
Am I right, Karen? She was married to Edward Woodward.
Yes, absolutely. And Edward, I was known for many, many movie roles, but one of his personal favorite was filming Breaker Morant, that he filmed, was directed by Bruce Beresford. And was a very big Australian movie. And yeah, I think was his personal favorite. It was very, very moving. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you should check it out. A great film.
Oh, I certainly have.
Yeah, Edward Woodward, big star in his day. And it was great, as you say, to grow up in all, or surrounded by all of those actors. My dad sort of started his career at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-on-Avon. And so that was super cool because, every night he'd have fellow actors come over to our house in Stratford. And I got to meet, Olivier and Burton and Richard Harris and, everybody. They were all over at our place.
Well, the great, sadly now late Charles Laughton, of course, was your godfather.
He was indeed, yeah. No, he was a great. I mean, can you imagine? He had a huge rambling house when he was at the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford, and he used to do treasure hunts for wee kids. And it was the scariest bloody thing of my life. I don't know if it was very godly, because he'd hide things down in the cellars and the basements and the attics. And then with that great big booming voice, where look behind you. And it was terrifying. But he was great fun. He obviously an incredible actor too.
But it's funny how things work out, because his wife, the fabulous Elsa Lanchester, wound up in Mary Poppins starring with you.
Well, that wasn't a coincidence, to be honest with you. Charlie Laughton had died before we made Mary Poppins, and Elsa was his wife, Elsa Lanchester, who was known for playing that red-haired flaming girl in Frankenstein. She was pretty depressed, obviously, because Charlie was gone. So it was my mum's idea, and she said to Walt, well, the nanny who just can't take it anymore with these bratty kids, why don't you think of Elsa for the role? And his brilliant idea, absolutely, cast, let's get her on set. So that was my mum.
Your mum, of course, was a great star of stage and screen as well, Kay Newman.
She was. She gave it all up to have We Three Kids, which was nice of her. Well, she did one comeback. There's a show in England. I don't know if it showed in Australia at the time. It's called Crossroads,
Oh,
which was
yes.
a soap opera, yeah. And she was on that for a couple of years. I remember Mummy said, "Well, you know what? You're all busy and you're all doing your own thing. Sod it. I want to do something. So I've signed us up for Crossroads." And we said, "Us? Who's us?" And she turned to my little sister, Yvette, and said, "You and I, we start work on Monday." And they were on that show for about a year. It was great.
Is Michelle still very close to Michael Crawford, who now, I believe, lives in New Zealand?
He has done for a bit, yeah. He and his wife Tasha, yeah, very close. In fact, I saw them. I was staying in a hotel in London, and I had Michael and Tash come and have lunch with me one day while I was there. And yeah, Michelle and he talk all the time. I mean, Michael's like my brother because I don't have one, and you know I grew up with him because of some mothers do have him. He was literally a part of our family, and I speak to them probably once a week. In fact, it's premature to say anything about it, but my husband and I are going to be doing something with Michael, but work-wise, which you'll hear about in a couple of months. But yeah, we are close.
That is fantastic to know, and great to hear too that he's in fantastic spirits. I wanted to say, Karen, I was reading somewhere, because you referenced your father, of course, with the Royal Shakespeare Company, that's where you began your career as a 4-year-old.
Yeah, well, I was late to the game, obviously. Michelle started at 18 months, but I must have failed all my auditions until I was 4. I'm not sure. But my dad was doing a play, The Caucasian Chalk Circle, which is Bertolt Brecht. No, I've not read it. I was just in it. And my godfather, Charles Laughton, was in it too. And again, we seem to be a family who volunteers each other because one day my dad was talking to the director and he said, "Well, we need somebody to play the little boy in Caucasian Chalk Circle." And he said, "Well, she's got long hair, but let's put a wig on Karen. She could do it." So here we go again, off to the races. Yeah, we're big on volunteerism in our house.
And that's where you were spotted by a Disney scout who kind of scooped you up and took you to Hollywood.
Actually, we went to Hollywood via Scotland because the first film I made for Uncle Walt was called The Three Lives of Thomasina, which was about me and a cat with Susan Hampshire and Patrick McGoohan. And so, yeah, that was the first film that I made for Disney. And so, I didn't have to audition or anything. They gave me that role, which was incredible. And on that film, the little boy, Matthew Garber, who ended up playing Michael Banks, we were first cast in that first film about the cat. And then they automatically put us in Mary Poppins because they saw we had chemistry, as they say.
It's a fabulous family story. Was it great fun to make for you as a little kid?
Oh, it was insanely fun because, I don't know the laws were that stringent back then, but I was kind of allowed to do anything. It was so much fun. And the cat is lost in a rainstorm and I'm sort of running through trees and forest and down in a port and in the pouring rain. And, I was allowed to get soaking wet and all the things I wouldn't have been allowed at home. It was terrific fun. So, yeah, making movies is fun.
And as I said at the outset of our chat, Karen, 60 years ago, Mary Poppins came floating into our life. It seems incomprehensible.
What a privilege to have been picked to be in something that is legendary. I mean, that film, I think, will be around forever. And I had an opportunity to appear in a movie about the making of Mary Poppins called Saving Mr. Banks, and with Tom Hanks and Emma Thompson. And that was... it was an eye-opener to me because I didn't realize how hard Walt Disney had worked to get the story from P.L. Travers and what a bugbear she was to let him turn it into a musical and with animation and stuff. But, he won the day, and it was 20 years in the making in his head of trying to get the rights to it and all his ideas for it. But that was Walt in a nutshell. He was so filled with imagination and And also the thing about Saving Mr. Banks, it taught me, I didn't realize that actually Walter had a pretty miserable childhood. He grew up in the snow, and he had to deliver his family newspaper every day before school, and walking for miles and miles in all sorts of weather. And I think, honestly, Craig, that's why he was so good to children who were working for him. I didn't get an opportunity to ask him, but because he went to work at the age of 7 or 8 for his family, delivering newspapers in the snow. When he encountered a child like myself or Matthew, he made sure everything was pure magic and that we were taken care of in the most proprietous manner. And such a privilege to work for somebody who was such a daddy figure for me.
Yes, of course. Matthew Garber played Michael Banks. You were Jane Banks. You two seem to just have this extraordinary on-screen chemistry, which he obviously identified. That's why he put you in 3 movies. What was Matthew like to work with?
He was a pain in the ass. Well, yes, of course, he was a boy and I was a girl, and I was a little girl, and little boys like to dangle worms in your face and pull your hair and stuff. But he was a typical brother, He was difficult because I was a girl. I wanted to be pristine and Victorian and nicely dressed, and he was always creating havoc. But he was a Dennis the Menace, and I loved him for that.
What about Dame Julie Andrews? She liked a little cigarette back then.
You know what? I think it was probably super stressful. She just had her daughter, Emma, a couple of months before, starting filming. And, she had to be trim and all these dance routines and songs, etc. And, and that was the day back then. It was the 60s. And I think men and women smoked. And so it was probably to calm her down a little bit. But she was so much fun, and she was so sweet and patient with me. It was a rigorous schedule for all of us. And she had like one day off because we were all going to lay down the tracks for the songs. And so we were in a great big sound studio and with a live orchestra. And I was meant to be singing the song, what's it called, Perfect Nanny. And I'd been coached at the Royal Shakespeare Company in England of how to sing this song. And the lady who taught me was probably about 180 and covered in cats and sitting in front of this very dilapidated piano in a dark room back in Stratford-on-Avon. And she taught me to sing it like this. If you want this choice position. Anyway, Julie Andrews, Dame Julie to me, was walking by and heard this awful sound coming out of this 8-year-old. And there went her day off. She stopped everybody in their tracks. Said, oh, hang on. Okay, can we take 5 on this one? I was going home, but I'm going to stick around for a minute. Actually, let's make it 25. Karen, come with me. And she sat me down and explained, I don't know who taught you to sing like that, but you're a little girl, just sing it like a little girl. So she was so sweet and loving and saved my butt because I would have looked stupid.
Well, and Karen, the other thing I guess that people probably didn't realize at the time, mightn't know now until now, is that she was going through a divorce at the time, her first husband, Tony Walton. So it can't have been easy.
And not only that, he was involved in the film too. So he was around a lot. And I think that was all very awkward for her. And in typical Julie Grace, she never let on. You wouldn't know. Ultimate professional. And a lovely, lovely girl. But she didn't break character much. I really respected, because Dick Van Dyke, who played Bert, he was also a naughty boy. I mean, he and Matthew Garber used to get up to no good all the time. And, he was always doing pratfalls and trying to make us laugh. So Julie had to kind of keep a straight face in order to win the respect of the kids as the stern but loving nanny. And so she didn't break character on that. And in the meantime, we were all wetting ourselves watching Dick Van Dyke. So he was so funny. And, he still is. He's a good friend. We see him all the time. Actually, my husband and I are going to be doing a thing with him, it looks like, in a couple of months. So at the end of the summer, we've got some busy times with these old mates of ours that we continue to work with. But he's a great guy, and his wife Arlene's a good friend too. So, and he just turned 98. It's crazy, and he can still do that sidekick that I could never do. He can jump on a desk, he can jump on it. I mean, he's incredibly fit. He goes to the gym every day, which I don't, and his faculties are all there. He's just like you remember him.
If you follow him on social media, Karen, he is a total unmitigated joy. He and Arlene sing together. They dance around their home. You know what? Those two do nothing but bring joy to people.
It's so true. And she has been a godsend for him because before she entered his life, he was pretty depressed. He lost his wife, and she came in, and she's a lot younger. She's like 30, 40 years younger than him. And we were all a little bit worried at first, of like, who's this? What's this about? But she has kept him going and kept him so filled with love and heart and joy, and a huge debt of gratitude to that one, because we might have lost him years ago. But, he wants to live, and he wants to have fun. He wants to laugh.
When Mary Poppins came out, straight away people focused on, oh my God, Bert's absolutely shocker Cockney accent. Well, rather than getting his dander up, he laughed along with it and is the first to admit that it was an absolute shocker.
He totally will. He says that to this day. But now he does say, but I was given a coach, a dialect coach for that. So it's not entirely my fault. I was following guidance. But I remember even on the set, he'd be, oh, what's the time of day with me, mate? And we're looking, what the hell was that? It did seem odd. But anyway, I mean, his charm supersedes any vocals.
And your dad was busy working, so I'm guessing that Dick Van Dyke was a little like a surrogate dad to you on set.
Definitely. He and again, Uncle Walt, who just recently I was at Disney Archives. They're very sweet and invite me over sometimes to the Burbank lot at Walt Disney Studios. And they showed me diaries of his where it's got, he's marked out time, and it says lunch with Karen Dotrice, and it was just he and I. So he was a great, between the two of them, I barely missed my dad. They were definitely looking out for me in my case, and I'm sure all kids, they're just good daddy types. And I know Dick's sons, and he has a band with his sons, and they're just a very joyous family. And he brought that joy to set every day. Again, for him, it was rigorous as well. But and he wasn't known as a singer, that he was an actor and a comedian, and so he had a lot on his plate. But he gave more joy than anybody else on set. He was incredible.
Julie Andrews, Dame Julie Andrews, of course, as a kid, I marveled at her flying in Mary Poppins, and then that magic bag where everything kind of popped out. And I thought, how on earth did they do that?
They made everything like it was real. I mean, to this day, I don't know how she took a lamp stand out of a bag. I was there. We didn't cut frame. I don't know where it came from. All of these things coming out. If she brought out a zebra, I wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, but they made things so magical for the kids as well. So they got reactions, and they just kept joy on set, But the flying bit, oh my God, again, I can't believe my mom and my chaperone let me do these things. We were actually, my very first memory, the first day of going to Walt Disney Studios, I thought it was a bit off because I went in prior to filming for costume fittings, obviously. And this one day I went in and they said, okay, Karen, bend over. And I'm okay. And I'm looking at my chaperone, and they said, right, we're going to make a plaster cast of your arse. Mummy, is that all right? They want to do a plaster cast. That's all right. Okay, good. And then from that plaster cast, they attached the wires, and that was the thing that propelled you into the air, and it was underneath your costume. But that was so much flipping fun. 60 feet above the ground with parental permission.
Were you ever scared?
Well, no, because it was Disney. You can't believe anything bad's going to happen because it's all magic and fun. So no, I was never scared. I wanted to go higher. It was so much fun. We had a and whenever they said, "Okay, Karen, your stand-in's going to come in for this one," I was like, "No, don't send me to school. I want to do it."
Well, you mentioned the Gnome-mobile too, which was another great fun family romp with Matthew Garber, but also with the great Walter Brennan.
For a little English kid, he was like the ultimate old timer cowboy type of person that you'd see in a movie. Walter Brennan had made so many of those westerns, and so my dad was particularly jealous because my dad's and I passion was watching westerns on the telly on a Sunday after lunch, there were copious amounts of them back in the 60s and 70s that we'd watch, and Walter was in so many of them. So I was totally starstruck when I got to be on set with him. And he was just another sweet, gentle person. It comes from the top when you've got somebody like Walt taking care of a set, and making sure that the cast is right. It was unfortunate because he died when we were making it. He approved the casting, but he died. And I think the film wasn't the success it might have been if it had had his fingerprints on it, if he'd been around to look at the editing and to promote it in a certain way, etc. So it was never the hit that I think he had hoped it would have been, but that's because we'd lost him by then.
Yes, you're very right, Karen. Whenever the great Walt Disney had his hand on the tiller, it was almost like the Midas touch, wasn't it? He just had that innate way of making even the most maybe absurd sounding story on paper suddenly come to life and be imbued with such magic.
It's so true. I think of Disneyland or Disney World. You go there and you're having fun in spinning teacups. Who would think of that? He's or on the Peter Pan ride or something. He just lived in his head in this dream state, and it's one of the saddest days of my life. I remember I was coming home from school and my mum said, "There's a phone call for you." Which I didn't get a lot of as a kid, that didn't happen. And I knew it couldn't be good. And somebody was on the phone telling me that he'd passed. And that was like the sun went out. He couldn't. But I had, in retrospect, I had an inkling that, he ended up having lung cancer. As I said, everybody smoked back then. But I had one experience with him. His office, the studio at the Disney lot, I'd go and have these lunches with him, and I'd go to his office first and then we'd go off to have lunch. And on this one occasion, he was coughing a lot, and he was obviously trying to cover that up because he knew he was sick and he didn't want anyone to know. But the child in me, I was worried that he was coughing and that it was, walking was exhausting him. And I said, "Uncle Walt, I've got an idea. I know what we should do. Your desk is so far from your door to your office. Why don't we move your desk closer to the door, and then you won't have so far to walk." And he gave me a wonderful piece of psychology into adults at the time. He said, "Hey, Karen, that's very sweet of you. I know what you're saying, but my desk is over there so that by the time those cigar chewing executives have come through my door and made it to my desk, they've lost the courage to ask me what they were going to ask for." What a blessing. I mean, obviously I'm thrilled that I was in those movies with him, but the greatest joy of my life is that I could call him a friend. I mean, because he's never gone away. He is forever magic. And anytime you get to be close to magic like that, that's the biggest joy, probably one of the biggest joys of my life.
What was the Walt that maybe a lot of people would never have had the joy of knowing? What was he really like?
Just a big kid, the big tough studio head and owner of this, that, and the other. I never saw that side of him. I couldn't attest to any of that. I'm sure in business he was probably as ruthless as he had to be, but as my mate, as my buddy, I mean, he was generosity personified. I remember on one occasion we had lunch at the cafeteria, and in the kind of basement of the studios, they have all of this storage of merchandise from various movies. And he took great delight in saying, "Come on, Karen, let's go down. You pick out what you want." For it wasn't the gift shop thing; it was where they actually stored everything. And I'd go down there. Oh, well, I'll have one of them and one of them. Oh, can I have one of those? And he was just so sweet and fun, and it was like being in a candy store with him every day. And then, of course, my mum, very wisely, I'd go home with cratefuls of stuff, and she'd say, "Lovely, pick one. The rest is going to the children's hospital or wherever." So, she kept me grounded. But if Walt had had his way, I'd be flying as high as I was in Mary Poppins.
Yes. Speaking of flying, I read somewhere that he had a fear of flying, and I don't think at that point in time you were maybe all that keen on it. Is it true that he would dress up his jet to make it look like you're in some kind of kids' fairyland as opposed to being in a plane, just to take that scariness away from the whole situation?
He did. He was such a sweetheart. He has the family still own it. They have a place in Palm Springs, and Palm Springs is about 2.5 hours outside of Los Angeles, where we lived and still do. And he also had a ranch in Santa Barbara, which is about an hour and a half north of LA. But what he would do to get there on the weekends, he had his plane. And back then there were prop planes. We hadn't got to jets yet. And the call signal for this plane, I'll never forget, was Mickey Mouse 1 to ground control, Mickey Mouse over. So he understood that I didn't like flying. And so he had the interior of this plane that we'd use of his on the weekends. He had it decked out inside like a sweet shop. And so he put all the sweeties in there. And then my sisters and I would sell my mom and her friends who were going up to the ranch or down to Palm Springs with us. We'd make money the whole trip. We were selling them Hershey bars and, whatever, Cadbury's chocolate. And it was a profit-making scheme. Thank you, Uncle Walt. It's probably why I got the house in Maine.
Simply by virtue of the magic that he brought to the world and the movies and Disneyland and the TV specials and so much wonderful music as well. But do you sometimes just feel him there?
Well, you're going to make me tear up because, yes, and I had that experience. I mean, he's never gone. I don't think nothing dies, in my opinion. You can't kill energy. It's around forever. And in his case, he's so deeply ensconced in everybody's hearts. He'll never go. But just recently, our old housekeeper from England, she passed, and her kids said, and we've got some not paintings, they're cells, animated cells, copies, a piece of celluloid, if you will, with drawings, the original drawings for various movies that are signed to you. And, somehow or other they've ended up at ours, and, we'll get them back to you. So I just had them framed last week in Maine. And it's got Walt's signature on it, and he gave them to me. And one's from it's an original thing of from 101 Dalmatians, an original drawing animation, and another one of Tinkerbell. I've got 4 that he gave me, which I hadn't seen in 60 years, and I just had them framed to put into a new house that we're getting in Florida. And so he keeps popping up in my life. I mean, just when I think, I haven't felt him in a while, he comes back again. It's odd.
Matthew Garber, we've been talking about. You did 3 Disney movies together. He was so young when he left us, I think 21. What happened, Karen? Were you in touch with him over the years, or had you kind of lost touch, as obviously what happens an awful lot in this biz?
Yeah, well, I think our parents were in touch, but, we all went back to school into our lives, regular stuff. And he had, his brother Fergus is a friend of mine. And so I found out from him, kind of what really happened. And Matthew decided to put together a band, and he and the bandmates had gone off to India, and he picked up something when he was there, and I don't quite know what it was, but he got back to England and he was very sick, and he passed. You know, he was living on his own. He wasn't living at home, so there was nobody really monitoring in him. And I think it was probably a meningitis of sorts. But that was so shocking. You know, 21. My God. And that is one of my biggest regrets, that I hadn't. You know, we were teenagers, and you're not really friends with workmates when you're teenagers. I went to an all-girls school, so I was shy with boys. I wasn't going to be calling them up and saying, hey, you know, you want to go and get a pint? It was so I'm sad that, you know, we weren't more in touch, but I do feel I'm gratified that I'm friends with his doppelganger brother Fergus, because he kind of lives on through Fergus and Fergus's children. So that's a nice feeling, you know.
Beyond your Disney movies, of course, you made this British period comedy, Joseph Andrews, with the wonderful Ann-Margret. Tell me about that experience.
Ann-Margret, the most beautiful breasts I've ever seen. Divine. Oh, but, you know, she'd come onto the set. We were filming out in the Cotswolds in England, and always braless. You know, she took the whole burn your bra thing very seriously, and this was sometime in the 70s, and I got like little mosquito bites for boobs myself, and my biggest impression of her was, she's got the most immaculate body I've ever seen. You know, I may as well shoot myself now. There's no point in living. But she was a sweetheart again. You know, she was just I've never worked with anybody nasty, actually, which is really a blessing. She was a total sweetheart, so kind, and so imbuing everybody with confidence and love, and she liked to bake things and didn't show on her body. But she'd bring in, you know, brownies and cookies and all this for the cast and crew. She was just a really lovely girl. And her husband, Roger, was very sick even back then. And, you know, here's one of the greatest sex symbols in the whole wide world, devoted to the one man her husband, who didn't have a very healthy life, not of his own making, but, you know, a wonderful, wonderful human and wife especially.
Now, you did the 39 Steps, the 1978 version, with the late, very great Sir John Mills. You probably knew him from when you were a little girl.
Yeah, Haley and Juliet, I grew up with both of them, great gals. And John, I knew him, but, you know, to work with him was such an honor. And he was so nice to me. I remember he gave me like the nicest acting compliment I've ever had. And I've never really said this, but he said to me one day, Karen, I love your stillness. He said, you know, you're a young person, and people very often gesticulating too much. He said, you know, the camera is right with you, and you stay still. And you know, you come from a theatrical background, and I just was right chuffed. I was. That was such a nice thing for him to say. But, you know, John just had that it. But one of the most humble, sweetest chaps, you know, on set. Other actors of lesser importance, if you will, would be acting out, asking for this, that, and the other. And Sir John, calm as a cucumber, you know, one of the lads, always having lunch with the crew, just a good bloke.
Upstairs, Downstairs, of course, the iconic British show. You were one of the maids, I think, in the last season of that. Was it Lily Hawkins you played?
Yeah. That was great fun. They, Alfred Shaughnessy, who wrote it, he said to me, you know, we want you to be in it. Do you want to be upstairs or downstairs? Well, prior to that, all of the roles I played in all of those TV special things, I was always getting married at the end of the show, and I was the ingenue, and, you know, always with the nice outfits, etc. I said, no, I want to be a maid. I want to be downstairs. I don't want to be upstairs. You know, I've done enough of that. So it was great. They wrote me this part. Well, I thought it was great. Didn't work out so well, because my character, there's a well-known butler in the TV series Upstairs Downstairs. He's called Hudson, and the whole world for like 10 seasons had been rooting for Hudson the butler and Mrs. Bridges, the big fat jolly cook, to get together, and that was going to be the ultimate love story for them. But they wrote it that the butler, Mr. Hudson, Gordon Jackson, falls in love with my character, Lily, who's like a quarter of his age. And so, that went fine until it aired. And then I got hate mail like you can't believe. You split them up. I mean, I remember walking along the streets in Stratford-on-Avon one day, and this woman spat at me. I said, what was that for? And she said, you home wrecker. She said, home wrecker? What are you talking about? And she said, you split up Mr. Hudson and Mrs. Bridges. I mean, I guess
boy.
I don't know.
And of course, Karen, if the Shaughnessy surname is familiar, he was the father of the fabulous Charles Shaughnessy, who was Mr. Sheffield in The Nanny, of course.
That's right. Well done. Very good.
Look, you gave up showbiz decades ago, obviously to focus on being a mum, and you are a mum to 3 kids. Do you think there's any chance that any of your kids might follow in the Dautry's family footsteps into showbiz, or would you rather they didn't?
Well, I mean, the decision would be theirs, of course, but thank God so far, nobody has wanted to be an actor. I think I was super lucky back in the day being an actor. It was a kinder, gentler world. We didn't have, so much social media and all the pressures that young actors and actresses have today. So my daughter, actually, she works at Disney. There's a division of Disney called Searchlight Pictures. So she's in marketing. She makes the trailers for the movies. And so she's behind the scenes, which I think is the more dignified place these days. And my 2 sons, they're in different professions altogether. So, but yeah, so she's the only one who went into show business, but she's stunningly beautiful, and people wanted her to be an actress, but she's got more brains than that. I think it's a difficult career.
Oh, look, it is very difficult, and especially when you start in it so very young as you did. And of course, we always hear about the curse of the child star, and you hear those really sad stories about young actors kind of going off the rails as they're in that awful, difficult transition stage. It never happened to you, Karen, and I'm curious to know why it is that you didn't go off the rails, as they say. Was it because of such a solid family background with your mum and dad fully comprehending the biz as they did?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely, 1,000%. And I was lucky enough to have made great friends in school. My 2 best friends are still my best friends today. And so that added such a sense of stability. But, my parents ran a tight ship. Work was work, but then you come home and you're a kid. They gave us no quarter for that. And my mom was quite strict, and I think that kept all of myself and my 2 sisters stable, because we couldn't get away with anything. It was the same in the Mills family. I think all of those people who turn out okay, it's because the parents put in a lot of time and sacrifice to make that happen, and not be pushy stage parents, because you can put in a lot of time and sacrifice, but in the meantime, you're pushing your kid to go do this, that, and the other. And that's just not normal.
Now, Karen, I heard too that several years ago you went through a breast cancer ordeal, but thrillingly glad to say that you are A-OK and doing fabulously.
So it's nearly 3 years ago I had breast cancer. Yeah, so thank God that's in the rearview mirror. And, it was just a tiny little bit. I was lucky to find it. Make sure you get your mammograms. So that's behind me now, thank heavens. And I don't intend to play with that thing again. So the kids, all 3 of them, Garrett, Griffin, and Bella, were so supportive of me over that time, because it's not a bundle of laughs.
So get your checks is the message there, isn't it? Absolutely. Don't be terrified.
All of your bits and bobs, make sure somebody's on top of it for you, for sure.
2018, all of a sudden, Mary Poppins is back in your life because you had a really quite delicious cameo in that. And of course, it meant that you were back with Dick Van Dyke. And Also,
Mhm.
the wonderful Dame Angela Lansbury had a fab little cameo in that as well. Did you two get to kind of hang on set together, or did you and Dame Angela have different days when you were doing your bits?
Well, Angie was a neighbor of mine in Brentwood in Los Angeles, and we'd have tea together and all that. So she was an old mate anyway. So that was another calming feeling going on set with her there. So we didn't have any scenes together, but I knew her very well, and her husband too, and her kids and all the rest of it. So, um, it's a very small business as well. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but everybody kind of knows each other, and at some point or other, your paths are going to cross, and it's lovely. It's an intimate business.
She was just one of those totally magical people that I just never equated with maybe one day not being here.
I agree. Oh my God, from being such a raving beauty when she was young and all those amazing films she made and the incredible voice she had to aging so gracefully with such dignity and joy, and we just lost a couple of weeks ago the last of the two Sherman brothers. The Sherman brothers, Richard and Robert, wrote all the
Yes.
music, Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and every famous Disney film of that generation. Winnie the Pooh, you keep naming them. And Robert Sherman died a few years ago, but Richard Sherman, who was one of my very best friends, died just like a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, which was, to your point, you can't believe when these legends, and yes, he was 98, but, you can't believe when the light goes out there. You think, well, where have they gone? All of that magic, all of that talent, where's it gone? A Richard Sherman story, he wrote, as I say, such a massive canon of songs. But if you went to his house in Beverly Hills, as we did often, my husband Ned and I would go there for dinner, and he and his wife Elizabeth would deliberately make you wait and ring the doorbell like they didn't know you were coming, so that you could endure the awful bloody sound of "It's a Small World After All" as their doorbell. You press that bloody thing, "I world of laughter, a world of..." He'd kill me. So. But they're all bloody pranksters, all these people. They're just the best.
Probably one of the reasons I just adore you so much from when we first met those few years ago in Los Angeles. I think, Karen, underneath it all is the fact that you are a very great animal lover. And I remember when we chatted back then, you had a much beloved chook named Beyonce. Now, a little birdie tells me, it crows into my ear, that there might be a Taylor Swift in your hen house.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not a hen house, it's a nut house. We have too many animals, always have, always will. There's a dog on the sofa over there. The cats keep walking by, farting. It's just terrible. I'm glad we don't have cats around. Yeah, no, we're outside the window here in the forest where we live. Don't tell the neighbors. Well, they probably know. I feed a pack of 5 coyotes. They come when I call them every night, in about half an hour, I'll go, "Girly girl," and this coyote, well, actually, she's a hybrid wolf. She'll come running out and she'll bring her babies and stuff. And I think it's the curse of it's Uncle Walt's curse. He raises you up around all this magic and animals and stuff, and you can't stop. There's a squirrel glaring at me right now because I haven't thrown peanuts out in the last 15 minutes. But, yeah. So, yes, Beyonce passed. Well, Taylor Swift has taken over from Beyonce, hasn't she, really? Sorry. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah, so we've got one of whatever God made, I think.
I hear, see, these little birdies sing all sorts of things into my ear before I let you go to feed those squirrels and the wonderful coyotes. A book, and it has roots to Australia, and it could be a kid's book. Just tell me as much about that as you possibly can without giving too much away, of course.
Sure, thank you. Well, yeah, no, it was odd. In Maine here, there's a family who come out here, and she has a publishing company in Sydney, and she was saying, I was looking at your Instagram, and you were talking about such and such. She said, "Wouldn't that make a great story?" And I said, Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, well, you're welcome to the idea. And she said, would you write it for me? I said, well, it's going to be a long summer. Why not? Sure, I'll write it. So I'm going to write it. It's about animals, of course, and hopefully it's funny. And it's a thing that I saw and an experience I had just this summer in England. And so yeah, she wants to publish it for the Australian market. And if I do it well enough, who knows? Maybe it'd be a little film.
Just maybe they'll put you on a jet plane, bring you over to Australia so you can hype your book. That would be fabulous. We will have a drink in that case, Karen.
Oh, we will. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you so much for your kindness and your generosity with your time.
Thank you. You know what? You're supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.